Welcome to Third Fridays, the monthly legal talk show from Lois LLC featuring attorney Christian Seeson. This is the original forum in which real attorneys discuss workers' compensation issues, share their opinions, and engage in colorful conversations. This show showcases diverse perspectives of attorneys handling workers' comp cases, including case law trends, practical litigation strategies, and hot topics. Here's your host, Christian Seeson.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the May 2025 edition of the Third Fridays podcast. This year is almost halfway over, which is absolutely insane. And we've got a great show for you today. Before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to my guest from the last month's episode, Addison O'Donnell. We spoke at length about how the appellate division reversed a decision by the New York Workers' Compensation Board because the Compensation Board used an unregulated subject number to make a decision that deprived an employer and carrier of its due process rights on appeal, and basically was implying that application of the law really starts with that whole process of making a law, and it was a very, very interesting discussion about almost legislative history and how a bill becomes a law. If you remember Schoolhouse Rock, that was great. Today, we're going to talk about something entirely different, artificial intelligence. And listeners of the show may remember that 8 short months ago, we had the one and only Greg Lois here on the podcast to talk about how Lois Law Firm was looking at artificial intelligence to kind of bolster its product and its standing in the market, and all the tests that we were running outside of client files, outside of claimant files, to make sure that the security was perfect, or at least at a working level of perfection, before we allowed attorneys and paralegals to use it in-house, before we allowed and reported to clients that we would be using it. And we're not quite there yet, but if anybody wants a little background on it, that's a great show, one of our most listened to shows last year. Today, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, kind of in the realm of what are practitioners talking about it in terms of their own practices, their education of it all. And so today, I'm welcoming one of our attorneys in our New Jersey practice, Erica Fersch. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Christian. It's an honor to be here.
We have been talking about some ideas that you wanted to put on for a show topic, and it's been back and forth for a couple months. So I wanted to say to everybody that this is your first appearance, and we're honored to have you. I know there's got to be some, first episode recording nerves, but we know you are a fierce litigator in the courtroom. We see you all over our website and our social media presence. So I'm sure this really isn't going to be that big of a deal for you. But I think when we landed on AI as a topic, we thought about this presentation that you are giving on behalf of the firm to various members of, the New Jersey workers' compensation system. So maybe we'll start there. Like, how did that come about? Like, how did that, process come about so that, you were put in that position?
Sure. So the New Jersey Workers' Compensation Bar does Law Day every single year. It's held, it's something that all the courts do. It's a CLE seminar with different topics that's decided upon by, the head judges of compensation and all of the vicinages. Last year was the first year, and they could not find anybody in the state to talk about medical provider claims. And I know that from our discussions, I am somebody who, we've got a lot of jurisdictional medical provider claims. I'm somebody that, litigates them, files motions, does e-case research. I mean, I'm really in the weeds with the medical provider claims. And so Judge Dillon, who's he's the supervising judge in Hackensack, and he's my presiding judge. he asked me to speak on the topic. And because nobody else in the state would talk on it, it was broadcast statewide to all of the vicinages. So this year, when they decided on their topics, and AI was another one that was going to be broadcast throughout the state because they wanted uniformity in the message. He reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I've got to do this presentation. You were really great last year. Can we get you on to do it again?" And that's kind of how it happened. And so it was me, Judge Michael Dillon, and Christy Girolamo, who's a partner at another workers' compensation PI firm. He's a petitioner's attorney. And we, gave an hour of the portion was based on our talk and our conversation.
So, and just so everybody's listening too, right? We are definite advocates for our clients, but it doesn't mean we can't play nice with the other side. I'm sure that you ended that presentation and you and Chris didn't want to kill each other, despite being on opposite sides of the aisle. So that's always interesting. I think, forget AI, right? Talking about a topic with someone who's on the other side, if you were to talk about, like you said, medical provider applications, that might be a discussion where the materials might almost delve into like arguments and debates over what should be, because, you have different viewpoints on how the law should be applied. When you talk about artificial intelligence with someone from the opposite side of the aisle, did you find that you and Chris were kind of on the same wavelength as to how you guys approached AI, or did you view it a little differently?
Yeah, no, I think Chris, myself, and the court, we were all kind of on the same page about the topic and about how we should conduct ourselves and about what the concerns and everything are, because it is something that is, no matter what side of the table you're sitting on, we all have the same professional concerns. We've all got the same concerns in protecting our clients' exposure, protecting our clients' information. So it wasn't so adversarial. When I did medical provider claims, I also was presenting with Callaghy, who's our adversary and who brings a lot of these claims. So that was a little bit more of we have differing viewpoints, but here's kind of how we land on it. This was more, it was more neutral. It was more of a neutral topic.
Yeah.
We had different viewpoints in terms of what we could do with the information and what we wanted to do and how it would be helpful. But really, all of us in this practice and in this area of law kind of have the same concerns and the same, outlooks on what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and I think from the idea of a shared responsibility or a shared understanding of it, there has clearly been an aggressive approach by the New Jersey bar to provide education to its attorneys, to make sure that the ethical duties of a legal professional in the area are intertwined and not forgotten, right? Now, I can't imagine you go before a big group and start talking about the rules of professional conduct. You've got everybody in the edge of their seat, right? Like, teach me more about ethics, right? But then you have AI, this thing that people are using more and more in their daily lives, and for some firms into their work life. How did you find the rules of professional conduct to be in concert with AI topics or AI usage? Anything that you saw in those RPCs that helped you start off this conversation?
Yeah, it's interesting because, New Jersey is really at the forefront with this AI and with the technology, so much so that they are talking about including a CLE requirement and dropping the I out of DEI and making it DET, where it's diversity, equity, and technology. So there are a lot of, with the rules of professional conduct, the judge kind of really talked more about those. He'd really presented more about those. But it was really interesting for me to see how many different potential RPCs would be implicated. I mean, everything from you don't want to mislead or make misleading statements to a third party, is separate from you don't want to make misleading statements to your client, is separate from you don't want to make misleading statements to a tribunal. So there are, and then the competency, you have got to stay up to date with, your competency on technology and emerging technologies and everything like that. Going back to also, duty of confidentiality. There are a lot more ethical rules than you would kind of think would be implicated. But again, it goes back to attorney oversight, right? Attorney verification, human kind of checking off that everything is correct. That's where I think you are starting to see a lot of the violations of ethical obligations.
So, okay, so you are, like, yes, in terms of, the oversight, you're talking about, here's this set of facts compiled by an artificial intelligence bot, and the practitioner now is fact checking them, or are we talking about, let's say, managing partner Greg Lois asks any attorney in the firm, says, hey, like, I need a brief on this issue, and then the attorney compiles the information, and then is the oversight from Greg that you're talking about? What type of oversight did you think was most discussed in your presentation?
I think the individual obligation. I think that, yes, you will always have that duty of managerial attorneys, supervising attorneys. They will always need to make sure that, that they're responsible for their subordinates. The flip side of that is we are all professional attorneys. We're all bound by the same rules of professional conduct. So we are all under the obligation to check anything that we're putting our name on, anything that we're putting out into the world. So it's not even just Greg says, write me a brief, and then Greg's got to check everything. It's us as the attorneys, the practitioners that have the obligation as well before we then turn it on to him, and before we turn it over to our clients, to a tribunal. We've really got to make sure that we're in compliance with not making false or misleading statements.
Yeah, and speaking, it's funny because most podcast episodes go the entire length without saying Greg Lois's name.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he'd like to hear it more often, just like anybody else. So when I spoke with Greg in September, a big topic around artificial intelligence was the idea of security, right? And when you're using artificial intelligence to perform work for you, like, who owns that? Like, who has control over the information now that it's being passed outside of, whether you want to call it for like brick and mortar walls or for like digital walls of the firm, right? And did you have any questions or have any from maybe the audience, or maybe even things that you guys discussed as presenters where you were talking about, once you use AI, what are the steps being taken to ensure that the holder of certain privileged information is that consistent with the RPCs as like something that's not violative of privilege? Did you guys have any discussion around that?
We didn't get so much to the ownership of when it's used. We really kind of honed in on, are we allowed to use it? Because what are the things we would be using it for, right? Like medical records, indexes, and summaries would be huge. And that contains a lot of protected health information.
Right.
So the conversation wasn't, okay, once you use it, who owns it and who's responsible for maintaining its security? It was, well, are we even allowed to do this? The judge had asked me in chambers, as a defense attorney, he said, you're going to get this question, as a defense attorney, as a respondent attorney, are you allowed to take petitioner's health information, subpoena responses, anything like that, put it into AI to summarize? And I thought about it, and being on this side of it, I don't have the attorney-client relationship with the injured worker, the petitioner, the claimant, whatever it might be. I don't think that because once it does go out into the universe, you don't know who owns it, and you don't know what it's being used for. And AI, by definition, is something that takes the information that you give it and reuses it to craft more answers to be more useful in the future. It builds off of the information and the data. So I don't think that I would be allowed to take somebody's personal health information and put it into AI and summarize it without having a separate release. I think that we would need that to really put it into the cloud. Petitioners, attorneys, claimants, attorneys, they've got a different relationship. You don't know what's in their retainer agreement, in their engagement letter, their letter of representation. You don't know what the terms of that representation might be. So I think it is different. I think that the consensus was petitioner's attorney would need something in writing from their client allowing them to do this, and we would need something separate and apart from just the standard HIPAA release that we have.
I don't know about you. I think just thinking about that makes me think of all the times you're signing up for like an account on something online and you have all this like, long list of things to scroll through to agree to the terms and conditions of whatever. Like I just picture a petitioner's attorney in their New Jersey office just giving that to the claimant and basically signing over the usage of AI because they can't verify who owns it afterwards. It's almost like, you're talking about like keeping AI in-house as like a separate roadblock to jump over. And that's not even talking about, the accuracy, right? Like even the best examples of AI that we've seen to use in our own personal lives, they're not always correct, right? There are studies that even are referenced in your materials where you're talking about like, oh, well, AI is doing this, and compared to lawyers at top firms, they're comparing like the details of the accuracy and how and the speed at which they can produce output. But, it's very interesting to me. It's like, what percentage is actually permissible in this space, right? Because at the same time, as humans, we say this all the time, right? Like, I train all the attorneys that come in through the door from New York, and I almost tell them, like, you're going to make a mistake at some point because you're a human being, right? So that means that their accuracy is never going to be 100%, right? And so a lot of the drama and the news that we see about AI, firms getting admonished for using it, it's because, AI made a mistake that wasn't verified.
Right.
But how do we get to a point where we know what the percentage of accuracy should be so that like people can comfortably use it? Is that ever going to be a thing?
I don't know. And I because AI, again, is built off of, and AI outputs are only as good as AI inputs. And so your input needs to be really, really detailed in order to get a reliable output. It's also dangerous because AI outputs that are factually inaccurate sound really, really good. They're written really strongly. You would think that they're plausible. So, the potential for deep fakes is, I think, not deep fakes, but fakes is, more prevalent. But because it's something that the output is measured by the input and it's what it knows thus far, and it's going to keep changing, I don't think that we're anywhere near knowing when we're going to get like a percentage of what is reliable and what isn't. But certainly not, I don't think anytime soon, maybe in the future, but it's still very, very new technology.
Yeah. And you think about, like modern usages outside of the workplace, right? Like for instance, you might ask ChatGPT. I was visiting my brother in Tulsa a couple months ago, right? And we had ChatGPT just say like, these are the top 3 things that you need to do while you're in Tulsa visiting your brother, right? And so it's like, okay, like that, there's no harm whether that's accurate or not, right? But I don't have to do any of my own legwork. I could verify it and see if it, is really worth doing it. But, or someone might say like, hey, ChatGPT, help me write, an email to my mom thanking her for, being a great mother on Mother's Day, right? And you're now talking about, well, we're not, it's not now, right, that we can get to that percentage. Who knows when that will be and what percentage will that be? I mean, these AI, hallucinations that you reference and that are still being talked about, they're still happening this year.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You're talking about how these AI systems are giving these strongly worded statements. They sound like an attorney, right? Walks like the duck, sounds like a duck. It's probably a duck kind of thing. And in this case, if they're happening this year, right? Like, how can anyone feel confident in using it? It's almost like to continue to use it now without the checks and balances system behind it where you're doing your own due diligence. It almost seems like it's an automatic, ethical issue because the longer and longer that it stays in place, it's not just something that's new on the horizon. Oh, it's like, I flubbed, right? I didn't check the case citations, right, that ChatGPT gave me or, all these other companies, right? Did you get the sense when you were talking to people in the courtroom that people felt confident about using it still, even if they had been, or like people who haven't been using it, would they start giving it a try?
I don't. So once we kind of got through the benefits and the problems and the implications and things you need to look out for and what hasn't been regulated yet and all of those fun things where you've got the law trying to keep up with technology, it kind of ended up being it could be really good one day and it could be really useful. But right now it kind of just sounds like it's creating more work, creating more time, just going back in circles, checking everything because you've got to make sure that you're properly putting the inputs in and you're properly giving the prompts. And then you've got to go back and check everything that they've done. And you need to make sure if you're putting protected, privacy information that you've got all of the releases and that you've got everything, all of your paperwork in line and everything like that. So it kind of, the discussion came to be where, it could be really good, but right now it's a little bit too new and we're a little too unsure to really want to go full speed ahead. It's interesting, you talk about things outside of the law. We were prepping for this one day and Chris said, I got in, somebody had applied and their cover letter was written by ChatGPT. Now they didn't disclose it.
How do they know that though? I guess when you get the same exact cover letter from someone else?
No, I think when he was reading it, and again, certain things, they don't come out naturally. They're not free flowing. They're very
sound like a human. It sounds like
they're very measured.
More,
exactly. And they've got a bunch of big words. It's like back in the day,
using
my
a
day.
thesaurus.
Exactly what I was going to say. It's like just using a thesaurus for every single other word, and so I think that's kind of how they could tell. And he told me, he wrote back and he said, it sounds like you used ChatGPT. We'll no longer be proceeding with your application. I think that's the biggest thing too is the disclosure. Like you have to let the court know, you've got to let your clients know, you've got to let everybody know. And there's nothing in our rules of procedure in New Jersey yet that say you've got to certify, like with your attorney certifications. I know you guys don't do motion practice in New York, but we do it in Jersey. So every single attorney certification, if I use AI or if I don't, will there be a line that needs to be included as per New Jersey procedure? I did or I did not use artificial intelligence or digital technology, when drafting the certification.
It's almost just like, too, that's like the last final step where, from a PR or a marketing perspective, would you even want to write that? Would you even want to say that this is not entirely me?
Yeah.
Right. And I think as lawyers, you almost want to, really, you want to do something that does have some marketability, right? Like you work so hard on something and then for your output to just be like, oh, they used AI for this. Yeah. It's like, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Even if you spend more time doing it with AI because you have to double and triple check everything,
Right.
One thing I thought was really interesting, when I was looking into this stuff is, excuse me, not even so much a review or summarization of medical records, but witness prep. Like, they talked about it, the New Jersey Law Journal had come out with, an AI
summary or
like a magazine, but like a
like a journal
monthly
article or
yes, like the whole month of whatever March was dedicated to AI or something like that. It was
Okay.
a recent article, a recent publication, and they talked about it in terms of evaluating credibility under Daubert. I think you could even take it one step further. And are the medical tests that the doctor's using, is there something better that you can cross them on? Is there a way that you could go through this diagnosis or this, the radiology findings and kind of get it on cross? I think that there are other ways that could be creative that
like
would,
giving you ideas,
yeah,
strategy.
And so where you're not necessarily maybe putting information in, but it's a tool to help you extract a better
Right.
way to lawyer.
Right. You still might have some ownership of the data issues with
Yeah.
that, but like from a work product output, that's definitely different, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not saying that, this AI bot wrote it for me, but you're using it to kind of make your own personal investigation, your legal research kind of more targeted.
Yeah.
Because AI says, well, they're diagnosing radiculopathy last month, but out of nowhere, they just started changing the diagnosis to, a sprain or strain. Like, what is that? Is that something that's normal kind of thing? Can you use that? It's really interesting. I'm wondering too, like, if you're talking about motion practice and the disclosure rules of whether or not you use it, if you're using AI that way, would you have to disclose that usage? I would guess yes. I mean, because then everybody would just kind of pivot to that if they wouldn't have to. But I do like the framework of, having practitioners, who are, because really what you want to do is make sure people don't cut corners.
Right.
And so if you put that in place where they have to attest to the usage of this new thing, like people have been using AI for years now, but yet it's still new.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does curb it a little bit if you make them required to do it, because now it's, we talk about the RPCs and, there are elements of like negligence and gross negligence. Well, now if it's like signing your name is
Right.
different because you have to also say, I did or did not use AI.
Right.
Right. Really interesting stuff. What was your takeaway out of the entire experience? Right. So, you did medical providers apps one year, you're doing artificial intelligence this year. What was if you had to take one thing from that whole day, what would it be?
I think that my favorite part about Jersey being in person too, and our courts and the law day is you have the judges engaging in the discussion and, moderating and asking questions, answering questions. And then you do always have both sides. I don't know if it's like that in every vicinage. I know that Hackensack tries to do that where they have both sides presenting on topics. So it's really, it is a CLE. We do kind of give an overview. We do packets and presentations and slides, but it then becomes a bit of a discussion as well. And I love doing that because, again, we're adversarial, but we're all in this system together. And it will only help you be a better advocate for your case if you know kind of where the other side is
Sure.
mentally, and what they're talking about. So I think that's my favorite part about this is really just talking about it, learning about it, broadening my horizons. I'm so thankful that Judge Dillon has asked me 2 years in a row, although they made a joke at the end. They said, oh, Erica, 2 years in a row, they only invite the best. And I said, well, don't tell me that, because if I go back and I'm not invited for a third year, Greg Lois might fire me. So I know.
Yeah.
But I was making a joke,
Right.
but
That actually begs the question, right? Like what are you going to talk about next year?
I don't
at Law
know.
Day?
I don't pick the topic.
Right. You're asked.
So yes.
In medical provider apps, like, it's an explosive topic. And, artificial intelligence certainly has its place. Do you think that it's a, almost like a recap of the entire year where a judge is looking at it for topics? Like a judge is trying to determine, what should be presented to, the stakeholders in this industry. What do you think they do when they decide it's this topic or it's that topic? Let's ask someone to speak about it. Like, how does that process work?
I think it's probably not only what's going on in the culture and the climate of the New Jersey judiciary as a whole, but what are the issues that we could potentially see, or what are complicated issues, or what are things that are changing within New Jersey workers' compensation law. I think that AI was a big one this year because the New Jersey judiciary is, really focusing on it. In addition to that, there was public employees was talked about, in the beginning, and then they talked about temporary, partial temporary, which isn't a thing, disability benefits in Jersey. So and then like last year, it was diversity, medical providers, and discovery. So I think that they're just kind of topics that are overall the judiciary is focused on, and then what's going on in workers' comp right now. I don't think that it's like, because Judge Dillon called me, I think, February for May. So I think they probably start deciding in January and lock it down.
Beginning of the year, trying to recap everything and start to get everything in place. Well, Judge Dillon, if you're listening to this, just make sure you pick our star here, Erica Fersch, for next year. That was great. I think it was a great topic. I would imagine that, once a year, we have to do something about AI as it continues to develop.
Yes.
But very, very happy that you got to represent the firm. I think that's always a cool thing. For everybody that's listening, if you follow our social media, you will see, or you have seen, Erica Fersch's major wins in the recent past. But if you haven't, give us a follow or head on to our website. You can read all about her work. So for Erica Fersch, my name is Christian Cisan, reminding you to defend from day one.